welcome back to our channel. Don't ignore those tiny dimes, they could be worth way more than you think. The 1967 Roosevelt dime? Some mint errors have shocked collectors with huge prices. The 1977 dime may look common, but rare struck through and no S varieties exist. 1996 brings key mint mark editions, and even the 2021 dime has rare die clashes you won't believe. Smash that like button and subscribe now. You might just find a goldmine in your change. It's small, unassuming, and often ignored. Just 10 cents. A simple coin tossed into vending machines, dropped between couch cushions, or forgotten in the bottom of a jeans pocket. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking dime, minted in 1967, could be worth more than $10,000 today? It seems impossible. After all, 1967 wasn't even a particularly rare year. Over 2.2 billion dimes were minted that year. Most of them are still out there, rattling in drawers or sitting unnoticed in coin jars. But among those billions, a few slipped through the cracks of the U.S. Mint's precise machinery, coins that tell a story of human error, mechanical mishaps, and historical overlap. These are the hidden treasures, the rare anomalies that make collectors' hearts race. Let's rewind the clock. The year is 1967. The United States is in the midst of social upheaval. The Vietnam War is raging, civil rights protests are filling the streets, and a coin shortage from earlier in the decade still echoes in the halls of the U.S. Treasury. Just 2 years prior, in 1965, the U.S. Mint had made a dramatic decision. It removed silver from dimes and quarters, transitioning to a clad composition of copper sandwiched between nickel. It was a cost-saving move, but it also meant the end of an era. And in this liminal space between change and continuity, oddities began to appear. 1967 was also a year without mint marks. In an effort to discourage coin hoarding during the transition to clad coins, the Mint decided to remove identifying marks that would indicate whether a coin came from Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. That decision, though logical at the time, now makes identifying certain varieties even more of a thrilling challenge. One of the most famous of these 1967 dimes defies all expectation. It looks like any other dime, until it doesn't. Imagine you're going through a roll of old coins, just killing time, flipping them one by one, when something catches your eye. The color is off. It doesn't have the usual silvery shine of a clad coin. Instead, it's got a muted gray tone, a little softer, a little older. You flip it over. Something's different about the weight, the thickness. That's when the realization hits. It's not even struck on a U.S. dime planchet. Incredibly, a small number of 1967 U.S. dimes were struck on leftover 1941 Canadian 10-cent planchets, silver coins that should have never been anywhere near an American minting press. How did it happen? The likeliest explanation points to shared manufacturing materials and equipment used by both the U.S. and Canadian mints during World War II and the years that followed. Somewhere, somehow, a leftover Canadian silver blank, a planchet intended for a 1941 10-cent piece, found its way into the U.S. system, and someone accidentally struck it with a Roosevelt dime die. The result? A 1967 U.S. dime on a foreign silver planchet. To the untrained eye, it looks like a mistake. To a seasoned numismatist, it's pure magic. These rare dimes are lighter than usual, about 2.33 grams instead of the standard 2.27 grams. They produce a slightly different ring when dropped, a subtle echo of a bygone monetary system. And most importantly, they contain real silver, unlike their clad counterparts, which hold no intrinsic metal value. But rarity alone isn't what gives these coins their power. It's the story they tell. That's why, when one of these misstruck dimes surfaced at auction, it sparked a bidding war. Collectors understood exactly what they were looking at. The final price? Over $12,000. For a dime most people would have spent on a parking meter, yet that's just one chapter in the tale of the 1967 dime. Another variety, more elusive still, features a double die obverse. To the uninitiated, that might sound like a printing error, but in the world of coin collecting, it's one of the most coveted types of mistake. A double die occurs during the minting process when the die that strikes the coin is improperly prepared, resulting in a doubling of letters, numbers, or design elements on the coin's face. On the 1967 dime, it's most noticeable in the word Liberty and in Roosevelt's profile, where a ghosted outline sometimes hovers just slightly out of sync with the original image. The effect is subtle, but unmistakable to those who know what to look for. These double-die dimes are exceedingly rare. Fewer than a handful have been verified, and when they do appear, they fetch thousands, if not tens of thousands, at auction. One particularly crisp example sold for nearly $9,000, thanks to its remarkable clarity and strong doubling, but what makes these errors so valuable isn't just the flaw, it's the fragility of their existence. In most cases, coins with such noticeable defects are pulled by mint inspectors and melted down before they ever reach circulation. Only a few slip through. They survive purely by accident, artifacts of chance preserved by fate and curiosity. This is where collectors step in, not just as hobbyists, but as detectives of history. They scour estate sales, old boxes in attics, forgotten coin albums passed down from grandparents. They know that value hides in the ordinary, and they understand the clues that most of us overlook, and sometimes, they strike gold, or silver, as it were. One such story involves a man in Ohio who purchased a bag of mixed coins from a flea market in the late 1990s for $5. At first glance, nothing in the bag seemed unusual. Just loose change. But something about one of the dimes felt off. It looked slightly older, yet was clearly dated 1967. Its edges weren't reeded like modern dimes, they were smooth, worn, as if from a different era. He brought it to a local coin shop. The dealer's eyes widened. A week later, it was authenticated and graded as a 1967 US dime struck on a foreign silver planchet. The final auction value? Over $11,000. The man, stunned, said he almost gave it to his grandson to use for a school lunch. That's the beauty of numismatics. You never know what might be hiding in plain sight, and while the 1967 dime is among the most mystifying of modern coin anomalies, it's hardly the only one. Throughout the history of the U.S. Mint, there have been countless mistakes that turned into marvels: coins struck on the wrong blanks, off-center images, missing letters, doubled inscriptions, and even transitional errors where coins were struck using outdated dies or inappropriate metal compositions. In 1967, these mistakes were particularly likely because of the experimental nature of the post-silver minting process. The mint was adapting, retooling, and sometimes making do with leftover materials. Mistakes were bound to happen. But what makes them so valuable today is their extreme scarcity, and the fact that they're hiding in plain sight among billions of ordinary coins. You could be holding one right now. So what should you be looking for? First, the sound. Silver coins have a higher pitched ring than clad coins. Drop one on a wooden table or a hard surface, it should chime, not clunk. Second, the weight. A precise digital scale will tell you if a dime weighs more than the usual 2.27 grams. Anything closer to 2.3 grams might be a clue. Third, the visuals. Examine the edges. Are they smooth instead of reeded? Are there any unusual tones in the metal, like the soft gray patina of old silver? And finally, the details. Use a magnifying glass or a loupe to inspect the date, lettering, and Roosevelt's profile. Look for doubling in the letters or an unusual blur in the image. That's where secrets hide. If you find something that stands out, don't spend it. Don't clean it. Get it graded. Professional coin grading services like PCGS or NGC can authenticate and encapsulate rare finds, protecting their value and documenting their history, because here's the truth: every coin has a story, but only a few are legends, and those legends, like the 1967 dime struck on a Canadian silver planchet, or the double die obverse error, remind us that sometimes, value isn't measured by what something costs, but by what it whispers about the past. So the next time you find yourself with a handful of loose change, don't just toss it aside. Look closer. Listen. Because buried in that pile of pocket change could be a tiny, shining portal to history. Check your coin jars. Search those old rolls. Open the drawer you haven't touched in years. You might just be holding the next great numismatic mystery. After all, it's not just 10 cents. It's a treasure, hiding in plain sight. It looks just like any other dime. Same silver gray shine, same Roosevelt profile, same, 1 dime, stamped on the reverse. You've probably held a dozen of them today without even noticing. But in 1977, one particular Roosevelt dime slipped past the eyes of inspectors, went out into the world, and became something of a legend among collectors. Not because of its age, not because of its composition, but because of an astonishing, almost impossible minting error, and the craziest part, this single coin, which many would mistake for pocket change, has sold for between $52,000 and $115,000 at auction. Let's go back to the late 1970s. Disco was dominating the airwaves, gas prices were climbing, and the Cold War loomed over everything like a fog. Amid this backdrop of cultural upheaval, the U.S. Mint kept pressing forward, producing hundreds of millions of coins each year. The Roosevelt dime, introduced in 1946 following President Franklin D. Roosevelt's death, had by now become an everyday fixture, familiar, predictable, mass-produced. In 1977 alone, more than 1.5 billion dimes were minted between Philadelphia and Denver. Most of these coins passed through vending machines, toll booths, and lunch counters without a second thought. But somewhere, in a fluke of timing and mechanical miscommunication, a remarkable error occurred. It started with the planchet, the blank metal disc on which a coin is struck. Each coin denomination has its own size, weight, and metallic composition. A Roosevelt dime should be struck on a copper-nickel-clad planchet weighing 2.27 grams, precisely sized for the dime's dies, but in this extraordinary case, the coin wasn't struck on a dime planchet at all. Somehow, during production, a blank intended for a quarter, a 24.3 mm disc instead of the dime's standard 17.91, was mistakenly fed into a dime press. The quarter-sized planchet was then struck by dime dies, leaving a dime design floating awkwardly on a much larger surface. What resulted was a dime struck on a quarter planchet, a misalignment so bizarre, so visually stunning, that it stunned collectors the moment it was discovered. At first glance, this might seem like an obvious reject, something that should have never left the mint floor. But minting lines operate at blistering speeds, stamping hundreds of coins per minute. Mistakes, especially ones that appear after a die has already been damaged or misfed, sometimes escape notice. When this particular error coin slipped out into the public and was eventually found, its appearance alone made people stop in their tracks. The Roosevelt design, typically centered and proportionate, looked like it was swimming in a sea of blank metal. The lettering and bust were completely off-center, and the edge lacked the standard reading found on all modern dimes. Collectors immediately understood the significance of what they were seeing. A coin like this defied explanation and expectations. It was as if two worlds had collided, a dime's identity forced upon a quarter's body, and that's when the value skyrocketed. One of these coins sold for a jaw-dropping $52,000 at auction. Another example, perhaps in better condition, or struck slightly more cleanly, commanded an unbelievable $115,000. For a dime that never should have existed, but the rarity and value of this error don't rest solely on its visual oddity. It's about how perfectly the error exemplifies the fragility of perfection at the mint. These institutions are built on precision, and when that precision fails, it creates something truly unique. Not just flawed, but rare, unrepeatable, and valuable. It's like a fingerprint of imperfection in a sea of sameness, and part of the allure is in the mystery. How did a quarter blank end up in a dime press? Was it a simple mechanical error? Did planchets get mixed during transport or feeding? Was it a worn die? A misaligned collar? No one knows for certain. That mystery only adds to its legend. As with most mint errors, there's one important rule: condition is everything. Coins like this, when found in pristine or near mint states, attract the fiercest competition at auction. Grading agencies like PCGS and NGC have authenticated these examples, confirming the misstruck details and encapsulating them for preservation. Once certified, their fate is sealed. They become museum-worthy oddities, locked in time. But here's what makes this story even more thrilling: it could happen again. The U.S. Mint, for all its technological upgrades, still produces millions of coins every day. Human error, mechanical slips, and the occasional oversight remain possible, even in the most controlled environments. That means rare coins are still being minted, still slipping through, and still hiding in plain sight. And who's to say another 1977 error coin isn't sitting in a coin jar right now? Or in a drawer, in a forgotten change cup in your car, or passed down in a family piggy bank. You might be asking, how can I tell if I have one? Start with the size. A dime should measure just under 18 millimeters. If it's larger, significantly larger, it might be worth a second look. Weigh it. A standard dime is 2.27 grams. A quarter planchet weighs 5.67 grams. That's a massive difference. Next, look at the design. Is it off-center? Does the Roosevelt portrait appear small or floating inside an unusually large field of metal? Are the edges different, maybe lacking the usual reeded grooves? And finally, sound. When dropped, coins have distinct pitches based on their weight and composition. A dime struck on a quarter planchet will sound wrong. Not wrong in a bad way, but wrong in a way that might mean you found something exceptional. If you think you found something unusual, don't polish it, don't clean it, and don't spend it. Take it to a professional. Have it appraised and graded. Even if it turns out not to be the legendary 1977 error, it might still be worth something to collectors, because what looks ordinary to one person might be an extraordinary find to another. Coins are time capsules. They carry not only economic value but the scars, stories, and surprises of the moment they were created. The 1977 Roosevelt dime struck on a quarter planchet is more than just a mistake. It's a conversation between two denominations, a glitch in the matrix of monetary production. It reminds us that value isn't always printed on the surface. Sometimes it's hidden in the margins, in the anomalies, in the things that weren't supposed to happen but did anyway. So next time you're handling change, pause. Examine. Measure. Listen, that 10-cent coin you almost gave to the cashier might actually be worth more than a luxury car, because tucked between the folds of ordinary life are these tiny, metallic wonders, pieces of history disguised as pocket change, and the 1977 dime is a shining example of that wonder. It looks modern. Almost too modern to be worth anything more than 10 cents. A 1996 Roosevelt dime, by all appearances, one of the most common coins in circulation today. You see it in tip jars, parking meters, laundromats. There's nothing particularly special about it, until you look closer. Until you realize that one of these dimes, minted in 1996, holds a secret so rare and so puzzling that it turned heads across the numismatic world, and in one unforgettable moment, this dime sold for as much as $95,000. It all began with a quiet discovery. A collector, someone not new to coins, but not expecting anything extraordinary, was flipping through a roll of dimes. Nothing unusual, just part of a daily hunt for silver coins or minor errors. But as the light caught one particular coin, something didn't sit right. The edges. The color. The lettering. The whole coin felt off. That dime, it turned out, wasn't struck on a normal dime blank at all. It was struck on a foreign planchet. And not just any foreign planchet, but a piece of metal never intended to receive a U.S. design. Possibly originating from a foreign contract or leftover material, this planchet was smaller, thinner, and of a different metallic composition. Yet somehow, it found its way into the U.S. Mint's machinery, and received the full Roosevelt treatment. Errors like this are more than simple mechanical glitches, they're acts of minting defiance. A dime design on a completely different planchet is like printing a U.S. passport on the pages of a Canadian novel. It's a collision of two entirely separate systems. In this case, the planchet may have been copper or aluminum-based, or from a denomination never used in the United States. The resulting coin had unusual luster, slightly off coloration, and the feel of something not quite right. The weight was lighter than the standard 2.27 grams. The strike looked a bit shallow in certain areas. A trained eye could see it, but many others had likely missed it. And then came the shock. This dime, a 1996 Roosevelt struck on a foreign planchet, was authenticated by a professional grading service. The mistake was real. Verified. The coin was encapsulated, labeled, and entered into the annals of numismatic anomalies. At auction, the value of this rogue dime soared. One example sold for $40,000. Another, in near pristine condition, fetched a jaw-dropping $95,000. Just imagine, $95,000 for a coin that could have slipped from your fingers at a gas station, never to be seen again. So how did it happen? The US Mint occasionally mints coins for other countries, usually smaller nations without the resources to produce their own currency. In these rare cases, foreign blanks and planchets are shipped into US facilities. With millions of domestic coins being struck every day, it's not unthinkable that one of those foreign blanks could have been misrouted, accidentally struck by a US die, and sent out into circulation. The 1996 dime error is believed to be a byproduct of one such situation. A foreign planchet, possibly from a Caribbean or Central American contract, was accidentally placed into the press line for dimes. The resulting coin bore all the markings of a standard Roosevelt dime, but in a form completely alien to its peers. Now, here's what makes it even more fascinating. The year 1996 marked the 50th anniversary of the Roosevelt dime. There were special collector sets, proof issues, and celebration within the numismatic community. That a bizarre mint error would occur in such a symbolic year only added to the mystery and significance. Of course, not every unusual 1996 dime will be worth thousands. But this story is a powerful reminder of what can happen when manufacturing precision is interrupted by the unpredictable chaos of reality. It's a glitch in the machine that turns ordinary coins into extraordinary artifacts. Collectors value these coins not just for the monetary payoff, but for the hunt, the discovery, the idea that something so valuable could be hiding in a handful of change. They know that coins like these rewrite the rules, challenge assumptions, and create legends. So how can you tell if your 1996 dime might be one of these elusive errors? Start with weight. If the coin feels unusually light, or if a digital scale reveals something under 2 grams, it could be a sign. Next, examine the coloring. Does the coin have an off tone? More coppery or golden than the standard silver gray of clad coins? That could point to a different alloy. Also, inspect the edge. Most Roosevelt dimes have reeded edges. If yours is smooth or only partially reeded, you might be holding something remarkable. Finally, consider the strike itself. Is it weak or shallow in parts? Do the details seem slightly off-center or oddly faded? That can happen when the planchet wasn't the right size or metal for the dies being used. And again, don't clean it. Don't spend it. If something feels off, take it to a coin shop or send it for professional grading. $1,140 digital scale and a few minutes of curiosity might just lead you to a $95,000 surprise. Stories like the 1996 dime prove that hidden treasures still exist, quietly, patiently waiting to be discovered by someone who's willing to look just a little closer, because at the end of the day, it's not just about the money. It's about wonder. About the idea that even in the most ordinary places, in your pocket, under your car seat, inside an old coin jar, there could be a sliver of history. A mistake that became a miracle. A dime that became a legend. And if there's one thing we've learned so far, it's that you never truly know the value of a coin until you take the time to listen to what it's telling you. So check your change. Open those old rolls. Ask your grandparents if they've still got that coffee can full of coins in the garage. Because that 1996 dime you're about to hand over at the checkout counter, it might be worth more than everything in your wallet combined. It's almost too new to believe. A 2021 Roosevelt dime, barely out of your wallet, barely aged a day. You might glance at it, see the familiar shine, the classic design, the modest date. And then, like most people, you'd probably spend it without thinking twice. But hidden among the millions of dimes minted that year, a few weren't what they appeared to be. A few carried a secret, an accidental quirk of history and machinery that transformed one ordinary-looking coin into a numismatic anomaly. One of these dimes, minted just a few years ago, sold at auction for an astonishing $70,000. That's not a typo. A coin that might have paid for 10 minutes on a parking meter ended up fetching the price of a luxury vehicle. And the reason? A minting error so subtle, yet so rare, it's practically invisible unless you know exactly what to look for. To understand this coin's value, we need to look behind the scenes, into the inner workings of the US Mint in 2021. The year was marked by coin shortages, economic turbulence from the pandemic, and a renewed focus on the circulation of smaller denominations. Mints in Philadelphia and Denver were under pressure to produce billions of coins, fast. Under that strain, as machines ran at full throttle, the tiniest mistakes began to slip through, and somewhere along the production line, a 2021 Roosevelt dime was struck on the wrong material. Instead of being minted on the standard copper-nickel-clad planchet, this particular dime was accidentally struck on a silver planchet, most likely one intended for a proof or collector's coin. The coin was then released into general circulation, completely by accident. That's the kind of mistake that turns a 10-cent coin into a 5-figure legend. Collectors couldn't believe it at first. After all, silver Roosevelt dimes haven't been minted for general use since 1964. Since then, every circulating dime has been made from a sandwich of copper and nickel. So how did a silver dime sneak into the modern world? The answer lies in the mint's dual operations. While the mint produces regular circulating coins, it also strikes special collector's items, proof sets, silver sets, and commemoratives. Sometimes, blanks intended for those high-end coins get mixed into the wrong production line. And when that happens, the wrong metal meets the wrong die. The result? A ghost. A time traveler. A coin that shouldn't exist in the year it was made. This 2021 silver dime is visually identical to its copper-nickel counterpart. But under a careful eye, and more importantly, under a scale, it reveals its secret. A normal dime weighs 2.27 grams. A silver dime weighs slightly less, around 2.5 grams if struck from a leftover silver planchet, or noticeably lighter if the blank came from a foreign or experimental batch. Once collectors caught wind of these rare dimes, the race was on. One example sold for $24,000. Another, with near-flawless condition and fully struck details, shocked the auction floor when it hit $70,000. And the wildest part? There could be more. Because silver is bright, shiny, and dense, many people wouldn't think twice if they saw one of these dimes. It feels like quality. It feels valuable, but maybe not life-changing valuable. That's why some may have unknowingly spent them, dropped them in coin machines, or buried them in change drawers without a second glance. But here's where things get really interesting. There are rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that some of the error coins weren't just struck on silver planchets, but on foreign silver planchets, possibly intended for use in limited runs or international contracts. That would make them even rarer, a 1-in-a-million anomaly. And in the world of coin collecting, anomalies are everything. So how can you tell if your 2021 dime is something special? First, check the edge. A regular dime has a distinct copper-colored stripe running through the edge. If yours doesn't, that's a red flag worth checking. Next, weigh it. Use a precise digital scale. Anything over or under the standard weight could signal an error. Then, listen. Drop the coin on a hard surface and hear the ring. Silver coins produce a high, bell-like tone that is unmistakable once you've heard it. If your 2021 dime sings like that, you might have a sleeper hit on your hands. Finally, get it tested. A local coin dealer can run a non-invasive conductivity or metal test to confirm the alloy. If it turns out to be silver, or something even stranger, your next stop should be a grading service like PCGS or NGC. Authentication is key to unlocking the coin's full value, because in this case, the coin's story is as important as its composition. The 2021 Roosevelt dime with a silver error isn't just a rare coin, it's a reminder that perfection isn't always perfect. That in a system built on consistency, it's the flaws, the beautiful, improbable, 1-in-a-billion flaws, that capture our imagination and our wallets. And that's what this entire journey has been about. From 1967 to 2021, these coins have whispered to us from change jars, sidewalks, and vending machines. They're the overlooked, the underappreciated, the mistaken. But in those mistakes lies value, not just financial, but historical. Every one of these dimes tells a story of how something tiny, something dismissed as ordinary, became extraordinary. So don't just walk past your change. Don't ignore that small clink of metal on the counter. Check your pockets. Go through old rolls. Flip through inherited coin collections. Because somewhere, in the chaos of daily life, there might be a dime waiting to rewrite your story. A coin that proves, even in the most modern of years, a hidden treasure can still be hiding in plain sight. And who knows, your next trip to the grocery store could turn into a $70,000 discovery.